Hi, guys. Today I have another fantastic guest for you. I have with us here Brother Rachid, who I will speak to in Arabic in a second. Before I cede the floor to him, he is an ex Muslim who converted to Christianity. His father is an imam, so he'll tell us all about how that went down in his family. He is a televangelist who hosts a show called on a TV network called Al Hayat, which is the life. So a lot to talk about. How are you, Rashid?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being on. So I'm going to switch to Arabic, uh,
Okay.
and then we'll see what happens. Okay. So هذيك السنة صاحبنا حامد عبد السماد كان زاير هون حكينا سوا. وأول
Yeah.
سؤال اللي سألته إذا هو كان حاضر يعترف إنه اللهجة اللبنانية أحلى لهجة من كل اللغات العربية. هلا هو اعترف انه اللهجه اللبنانيه حلوه، بس كمل انه اللهجه المصريه هي الاصوليه. هلا رح بسالك ذات السؤال، انت حاضر تعترف انه اللهجه اللبنانيه اكيد احلى من اللهجه المغربيه، صح؟
انت عارف بتحطني بموقف حرج. It's a tough question. I'll tell you this. Every language or every dialect is beautiful in the eyes of its own people. So Moroccan dialect is beautiful for Moroccans. Lebanese is beautiful for Lebanese. But I can tell you personally, I like Lebanese accent. I like Lebanese dialect.
Shukran, Habibi. Just to translate, although you could probably guess from the response of Brother Rashid what the question was, I started off by telling him that last year I had a mutual friend, Habib Abdul Samad, on the show, and I asked him if he thought that Lebanese, he's Egyptian. I asked him if he thought that the Lebanese accent was the most beautiful one. And so I posed the same question to Rashid and asking him to admit that Lebanese Arabic is more beautiful than the North African Arabic, but he answered us diplomatically. Okay, now to some serious issues.
But I like Lebanese tabbouleh. We don't have it.
تفضل
So
عبيد
you win.
تفضل عبيدنا امتى ما بدك. Uh, come over to our house anytime you'd like.
All right.
Okay, Rashid, why don't you start? I mean, I gave people a little snippet of your personal history, but why don't you tell us where you were born, how your religious transformation happened, just so that people get a sense of who you are.
My name's Rachid. I was born and raised in Morocco to Muslim conservative family. My dad was the imam for the local mosque for the village, and I am one of seven. I have seven siblings, and that's pretty much in general about me. But at the age of 12, I started listening to a radio program on Transworld Radio coming from Monte Carlo. And that was the beginning of my transformation. The first time I heard about Jesus in Arabic, not from a Muslim point of view, from a Christian point of view, because Christianity in Morocco, as you might know, that Christianity was erased from North Africa through the Muslim raids. And actually, Christianity was very powerful in Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco, North Africa back then. But when Islam came, we don't have any more local believers like Moroccan Christians or Algerian Christians. Not like Lebanon, not like Jordan or Egypt. So I didn't hear much about Christianity until I was listening to the radio, and then I started a journey of comparing Islam and Christianity, which ended up with me accepting Christ as my Savior.
What were the points of comparisons, the main ones that allowed you to make that choice? What is it that you didn't like about Islam that you found in Christianity?
Many things. That's a book by itself to show you the differences. But I can tell you some main points. The message of love that Jesus brought, and especially the Sermon on the Mount, was really a powerful one. And reading the Quran and being raised as a Muslim kid, I knew how much hatred is taught in our culture. And I was able to see the contrast between um, the message of Christ and the message of Muhammad. That shook my ground at first. But there are other things. For example, the crucifixion of Christ is a topic that both sides are on both ends. Christianity says that Jesus was crucified. Islam says somebody else was crucified instead of him. So when I compared that topic, I concluded that there are powerful arguments that lean toward Christianity, but Islam lacks those powerful arguments. When you come to the life of Muhammad, I like the life of Jesus. He was a peaceful man. He just preached the gospel to people, or the good news, and then he was crucified for his beliefs. So he is a hero in my eyes. But Muhammad, he used religion for his sake. He used religion to get money, to get sex, and to get power. And these three things are driving every human being on this earth. So Christ didn't have these things. So I liked him very much as a powerful leader who changed society just through a peaceful message.
Speaking of some of those things that Muhammad went after, I think, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was Aisha, his favorite wife, who said, I'm paraphrasing, of course, that, oh, apostle of God, it's quite extraordinary that you seem to receive revelations that are perfectly consistent with your situational earthly desires. So...
Yes, yeah. She said, like, I see that your God is quickly responding to your desires.
So tell me, before we might get back to some of the specifics of the canonical texts of Islam,
yes.
How did your family, I mean, your dad is an imam, right? So
yes.
how does your family in general, and perhaps your dad in particular, respond to your religious decision?
My dad, by the way, died a year ago, exactly a year ago. So
Allah yarhamu.
Allah khalik. So my dad, I didn't tell my family, to be honest. It's a scary thing in the Muslim world to change your religion. So I'm not going to say I was really a hero at the beginning. I just had my faith inside me, and I tried to not show it to people around me, to hide it. But I couldn't. I was discussing with one of my cousins, and then the subject of, always the West and them and us, it's always an argument. And he started like those Christians, and they started like saying things against them. And he said they changed their scriptures, they killed their prophets. And I said, do you have any evidence that they did that? And suddenly he looks at me and said, what do you mean? It's obvious. I said, no, it's not obvious. Can you prove it? And then we started an argument, and he said, I see that those correspondence courses changed your worldview. I said, of course. When I compared, I saw that we don't have any evidence. We're just saying things. And then he took it. He told my family that Rachid became a Jew, a Zionist, a Christian, and he just put all of them together in one pot.
Well, the most fundamental insult in that region of the world is to call somebody a Jew, right?
That's right.
That's right. So even when you, for example, depose dictators, the first thing you say, all right, Mubarak is a Jew. Gaddafi is Jew. So people don't appreciate how Jew hatred is almost definitional. It runs in the DNA of the society's fabric. Maybe you could talk about... Go ahead.
Actually, in the Moroccan language, it's very weird. When we say a joke and it's about a Jew, and when we mention a Jew in a gathering, we say hashak. It's like, it's not... how do you translate that into English?
Hashak. Hashak. ما بعرف الكلمة. ما افتكر بعرف.
It's like I shouldn't mention it. It's like mentioning something. You apologize for mentioning the name.
يعني ما تواخذني.
ما تواخذني. Exactly.
Okay. Got it.
How do you translate that into English?
Well, I guess the word Jew is such a dirty word that you don't even dare mention the word, right? I mean, it's hard.
Yes.
It's hard to come up with an exact word for it, but I
Yeah.
think that's the concept here. Wow. Well, I think there's even. I don't know if I think certainly the Shia do this, and I'm pretty sure probably the Sunni folks believe the same thing. There's kind of a
Yeah.
hierarchy of impure things. I think najis, right?
Yes.
Semen and sperm and feces and
Yeah.
blood, and the kafir doesn't do too well on that list, right?
That's right. إنما المشركون نجس. It's they are dirty. They are not clean. But anyway, the Jew and Christian is an insult in Morocco, at least. So if you want to say somebody that he is evil, you say you are a Jew or a Christian, Nasrani
Right.
or a Yahudi.
Yeah. Perhaps you could explain the concept from the Quran of Ahl al-Kitab and then talk about the jizya, because when I tell that to people, they look at me with wide eyes as if I'm coming up with stories that are not there. Please explain this to us.
Yeah, well, just to finish the story,
Sure,
so
go ahead.
my cousin told my family found out, and then they did a gathering, and then I was kicked out of my family, and I lived like almost 2 years homeless, just going from one place to another.
But was there, at
And
that point, did you feel as though there was a physical threat on your life, or just you're disowned but go about doing whatever you want? We just disown you, but you're safe? Because I'll tell you, before you answer, since you mentioned Hazem Faraj, when he was
yeah,
on my show, he said, I'm going to slightly paraphrase in Arabic and then I'll translate. أهلي كانوا يحبوني كتير 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 بس غيرت ديني قرروا إنه ما يقتلوني. So basically what he said, that because my family loved me so much, they decided that they would not kill me so that was a manifestation of love, that they didn't kill him because he expressed his freedom of conscience. Was that something similar for you?
I'll summarize it in one incident that happened, and it will show you exactly what Hazem meant. It's almost the same thing, it just copied differently. One time I had so many arguments with my dad, and he was saying that you brought shame on me. I cannot face people. They tell me go preach to your son, and so why you did this to me? You hurt me. You brought shame on the whole family. Why you did this? And he kept just saying it. And to be honest, I felt sorry for him, and I felt sorry for my family, but it's something that I cannot change because it concerns something inside me. So I cannot be dishonest to my own findings and my own research. So I said, Dad, what Islam asks you to do at this point? And he just looked at me and he was like, what do you mean? I said, just tell me. He said, you know it. I said, no. I want to hear it from you. And they said, to kill you. I said, why don't you do it? Go ahead. I'm sick and tired of all this. I want to go. I don't want to exist anymore. And he just looked at me, and I can see tears in his eyes, and he said, you know I cannot do it. I said, why? He said, you are my son. I said, see, you have a heart, but the God you are serving doesn't have one. So that summarizes the whole story.
By him going with his biological instinct to love and protect his son.
Exactly.
I'm big for the Allah, right? He is hating God by not going with his wishes, correct?
His humanity won against his religion.
Wow, incredible. So, okay, explain to us Ahl al-Kitab and the Jizya.
Well, I mean, in Surah 9:29, and I see everybody knows it, that Muslims are ordered to fight against الذين لا يؤمنون بدين الحق لا يدينون بدين الحق, like they don't have the true religion, من أهل الكتاب, which are the people of the book. So they are ordered to fight them, which are Christians and Jews, both of them. They are Muslims are ordered to fight Christians and Jews until they have three choices, actually: Islam, jizya, or be killed. And I don't know if the third one is a choice, actually. So just Islam or jizya. And jizya is a tax, a religious tax. You have to pay it so you can save your life. So actually, you are buying your life. You are paying a ransom so you can live. And so many Muslims, they just say, oh, it's not a big thing. It's just dinarain, dinars. And I say, how do you know it's a small thing? Well, it's like zakat. Muslim pays 2.5%, and the other one pays dinarain just for every male, adult male. What's the big deal? I say, how much dinarain if you compare it to nowadays money? Dinarain, it's a lot of money back then. That's almost 24 dirhams, which is actually, if you are for the whole year, you can get 8 dinars.
So 25% of your income, basically.
Exactly. 25% of your income goes to them for every male. So if you have 2 people in the household, you pay half of your income. And imagine if you have 3. And actually, people used to sell their kids so they can pay a ransom for their own lives. That happened in Libya, if you read history.
Well, and by the way, people don't appreciate that the subservient class that the people of the book held in Islamic countries is not just based on the jizya. It's really the status of a dhimmi, which people in the West sort of don't appreciate. And as somebody who grew up in Lebanon, in Lebanon, you would think, oh, it was the most progressive and modern and westernized place. So even though we didn't pay officially a jizya, right? There isn't a Muslim overlord that came over to our house and said, okay, Jew, where's your jizya? But you still lived with the psychology of a dhimmi in that be quiet, don't advertise who you are. Thread carefully. So even in the context of the most advanced, modern culture in the Middle East, which was Lebanon pre-Civil War, 1975, you still had that mentality of the dhimmi, right?
That's right. That's right. Mentality of the dhimmi is now still in Egypt, for example. They call them Abu Adma Zarqa, the guy with a blue neck. Blue neck because they force them to wear a cross, a heavy cross that makes their neck blue because of bruises. So they call them Abu Adma Zarqa. And until now, and the cross itself is hated, so Jews, Christians, every symbol that represents these two kind of people, they are hated in our culture, and we try to deny this. We try to sell another image, but that's not the reality. The reality, there is hatred.
I think what I was going to say next is that I think the problem, one of the main problems, and I guess you get to the bottom of this with your work because you're trying to spread information, which of course all totalitarian ideologies don't want the spread of information because in the battle of ideas, they are fearful that they will lose in that competition.
Exactly.
Many people, whether they are Muslim themselves or they're Westerners, typically will look to their daily lives, right? So if I'm a professor, so I interact with many Muslim students, I have Muslim colleagues, so on. Not a single time have I ever interacted with one where the interaction wasn't lovely, right? So if I go to my personal well of experience, then I'm going to say, but what do you mean? I mean, every single Muslim that I've ever interacted with has been lovely, and therefore, what are you talking about? Because again, people are unable to differentiate between individuals, like your dad, who despite being an imam, who is an expert in Islam, decides to go against it because of his biological humanity. Well, people don't appreciate that Muslims might be lovely folks, but what they adhere to might have some serious problems. How can we get them to understand that difference?
I always tell them there is a difference between Muslims and Islam. Islam is a set of ideas and doctrines. So, for example, Islam allows a man to marry 4 wives. My dad didn't. So I'm not going to take my dad as a proof. See, my dad didn't marry 4 wives, so Islam doesn't teach that.
Right.
That's not right. Islam teaches that, but my dad chose another path. He didn't choose to have 4 wives. And you can apply that to every single detail in Islam. For example, cutting the hands, amputation of the hands for a thief, that's a doctrine in Islam. And it should be applied forever, since the start of Islam until the end days. So, does Morocco, for example, apply it? No. Tunisia? No. Algeria? Lebanon? No, they don't do it. But is that a proof that Islam doesn't have that doctrine? No. Even prayer, only a small minority of Muslims, probably in Morocco they did statistics, they came up with 15% of Muslims pray the 5 prayers a day. So almost 85%, they don't do that. So is that a proof that Islam doesn't have prayer in as a doctrine mandated in Quran? No. But so we are trying to take Muslims as the proof that Islam doesn't teach that. No, Islam, you should study it and study the life of Muhammad to come up with the true image of Islam.
So again, I've discussed this many times on my show, but it's worth repeating, especially with someone with your
Yeah.
expertise both in Islam and in Christianity. Could you explain to us the difference between the Quran, the Hadith, and the Sirah, just so that people appreciate that you really have to look at the totality of this trilogy to be able to truly understand the heart and mind of Islam?
Well, the Quran, you can say, is the word of Allah, inspired directly through the angel Gabriel to Muhammad. And Muhammad wrote it down, or asked people to write it down while he was reciting it during some periods of inspiration. When he has some episodes of inspiration when he goes into a trance or something like that, and he hears the bell ringing in his ear, and he's sweating and all that. So he delivers the message to a writer, and that's the Quran. The Hadith is anything else that he said or did or approved. So the sayings, the approvals, and the deeds of Muhammad. For example, if he did he let his beard grow and he shaved his mustache, that's also a hadith. Even if Muhammad didn't say it, he said it actually. But even if he didn't say it, you can take from that. That's how we should behave as Muslims. So his deeds are hadith as well. His approvals, if one of the companions with Muhammad did something and Muhammad didn't stop him, so he approved his action, that's a hadith as well. So approvals, the deeds and the sayings of Muhammad are the hadith. The seerah is the biography of Muhammad before he was born until he died, and the Hurub al-Ridda. The biography of Muhammad summarizes the application of Islam on real life, actually. So if we want to understand Islam, we have to understand these three main categories of authoritative text in Islam. The Quran, the Hadith, the Seerah.
And then link that trilogy to Sharia. I mean, I obviously know the answer to this. I'm asking this question for our viewers.
Well, I always say Sharia is everything organizing a Muslim's life, from the penal code to whatever he does in his life, what we do when we go to the bathroom. That's part of the Sharia. So every regulation is considered as Sharia. Marriage, and inheritance, and everything, every detail. So you can take it from these three sources, in the Quran, from the Hadith, and you come up with, it's like a law for a Muslim, how he should behave in every detail in his life.
And if somebody wants to learn about the specifics in Sharia, then the reliance of the traveler would be the sort of the classical, canonical source that you have to go to, correct?
Yes, now, that's one of the main books, yes.
What's amazing, well, first of all, you were earlier mentioning about how, 15% of Moroccans pray. Well, I bet you that, so I'm, as you may or may not know, I'm Jewish. And I'm willing to bet that I probably know more about Islam than probably 95% of Muslims in the world,
True,
right? And
true.
so if I quote something from Reliance of the Traveler when it comes to, say, how the penal system is determined based on the identity of the perpetrator of a crime and the victim of the crime, right? So Muslim on Muslim is very different than if it's Muslim on Jew, right? The penalty is very
That's
different if you kill somebody, which of course
yeah.
just that is by definition couldn't be any more in disagreement with, say, the American Constitution, which is defined on the concept of blindness, right? You're blind to the identity of the victim and the perpetrator. So then you get people who go on shows on CNN, on everywhere, where they will say things like, well, 95%, 98% of the Sharia is perfectly consistent with Western legal codes. And then the morons on all of those shows will simply defer and say, yes, amen, amen, you're right. How could we get Westerners to actually do the heavy lifting of spending the necessary time to inform themselves so that when somebody sells you this kind of garbage, you're able to challenge them?
Well, of course, there's a lot to do, and especially you and me and people like us, we have a huge burden on us so we can show the world what Islam is. And those who are trying to do makeup for Islam and sell a beautiful image of Islam and try to hide the ugly face of Islam, they are doing a good job actually convincing the mainstream media in the West, and they bought into that, and it's unfortunate when you see people like that, and they have a platform where people like us will not have any chance to go there and explain. Being a former Muslim and living in Morocco 32 years of my life, I can tell that I don't know how they came up with the 95% percentage to say that Sharia goes with the Western constitution, especially the American one. If every detail in it is against that, let's say, for example, marriage. You can marry up to 4 wives, and you can have concubines or slave girls, as many as you want, thousands even if you want. Where is that in the Constitution of United States? Let's say the penal code, the thief and stoning and lashing people and all that. Where is that in the Constitution? When it goes to, for example, even the what do you call it? Like insurance, if you kill somebody by mistake.
Oh, like blood money.
Diya.
Yeah.
You pay for the kafir is half of the Muslim.
No, actually, there's a very specific, isn't there sort of a very specific calculus? It's not just half. I mean, if it's a woman and she's kafir, it's this. If it's a Jew, it's that. So there's a whole arithmetic associated to how much, right?
Yeah, and inheritance. Let's say, for example, I left Islam. My dad died. I don't get anything from his properties or his money. Why? Because of my religion. So it's simple. So where is that in the Constitution? And it goes to every detail. A woman is not equal to a man in inheritance, in witnessing as a witness, because she forgets she needs another woman besides her with a male to make up the two male witnesses. So all that is against the Western worldview of human being, of equality, of all that. So I don't know where they come up with the 95%. And let's say even the 95%, a drop of poison in a beautiful glass of juice is still a poison.
Right.
So if you take 5% of Sharia is against the Constitution, what are you going to do with it? You're going to erase those verses from the Quran, or what are you going to do with it?
So
it's the whole thing.
Let me tell you what the Grand Mufti of Unicorn Islam, I call Unicorn Islam, is the Islam that only exists in the mythical recesses of every idiot who decides to say, no, no, but true Islam loves Jews. No, 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 but if you really read properly Islam, they love the homosexuals, right? So the Grand Mufti of Unicorn Islam, the great Reza Aslan himself, would say to you, and of course I say great sarcastically, I say to you, he would say to you, but Brother Rashid, you're an Islamophobe. I mean, first of all, you have to read these in context. People bring their own values to a religion, so there isn't one Sharia. There is infinite number of Sharia. Look at the peace and tolerance in Indonesia, which of course is not true. Look at the love and peace in Turkey. So there is no rigid code of Sharia and Qur'an and Hadith and Sirah. You interpret whatever you want from these so that you could come out with, instead of kill the Jew, it comes out to spill the Jew or caress the Jew if you only interpret it properly. What do we tell to all the Grand Muftis of the world that preach to Unicorn Islam?
You call it Unicorn Islam. I call it Islam Light. You know.
Or cafeteria. I heard the term. This is not my term. Cafeteria Islam, where you at a cafeteria, right? You pick from the buffet whatever you like, and you ignore the parts that you don't like.
Yeah, so you can choose the heavy Islam with all the calories in it, or Islam Light. Anyway, it's not what I say or Reza Aslan says. Islam is defined by the text and the application. It's not my application or Indonesia's application or Morocco's application. It's the application of the first Muslim community, because they understood Islam and they had the Prophet among them. So he explains things to them. So the first community defines Islam. If Muhammad cut the hands, that's the real interpretation of cutting the hands. If Muhammad stoned, that's the real interpretation of stoning. If Muhammad did raids, that's the real interpretation of jihad. If Muhammad, so everything is defined according to the first Muslim community. Otherwise, I will ask why Islam came to Morocco.
Right.
Did we invite Muslims to come to our country? Did we need them? Why they came? That's the first, actually, the first thing they did is raids. Muhammad lived his last 10 years. He did 83 raids. That's almost every 45 days. So don't tell me Islam is peaceful. If Islam was peaceful, the founder should be a peaceful man. He was not a peaceful man. And most of these guys, they will tell me it was a defensive war. Well, you can't find only one was a defensive out of the 83. Actually, we call it ghazu. Ghazu, it means you get out to attack. It doesn't mean you defense. So even the Arabic word, it means you go out. When he travels 200 miles to raid a Jewish tribe like Khaybar,
ya Yahud, Jaysh Muhammad.
Jaysh Muhammad Sayaud.
Sorry, before you go on, for those of you who don't know what we just did, this is a kind of war cry that people will typically sing very peacefully when they're about to go slaughter the Jews. But go ahead.
So if he did a raid in the morning, everybody going to their land to cultivate or to do their daily activities, and they were surprised, and then he is attacking them, Allahu Akbar, in the morning. Don't tell me that was a defensive war. Nobody buys into that. If you read the Sirah, you will be laughing if you read the Sirah and you watch the CNN interview with any Muslim, especially Khair and Reza Aslan and all these guys. They are trying to lie because they take advantage of Islam still not studied in the West by details. So most people, they get their information from the media, and they don't go into their books and read them. They don't have time or the energy to do it.
Well,
I did. You did.
Exactly. I think that's the key issue when it comes to certainly getting Western minds to be more informed, and that is to kind of get them out of their stupor, their cognitive laziness, and also the fact that most people don't like the idea that there might be some religious doctrines that are perfectly antithetical to everything that we believe is right, because that seems as though it is bigoted, it's wrong, right? I mean, what's the first thing we say about don't say anything in a dinner about politics or religion? That's gauche, that's inappropriate, right? So most people are decent people, and because they're decent people, and because they interact every day with many Muslims, all of whom are lovely and kind, they don't feel comfortable actually putting their head into those books. First, because they're lazy. It takes time. I'm busy. I have to go buy my tomatoes tonight, and I have a party to go to tomorrow. And also because they're decent people who probably don't want to know what's the truth in there. Because if it's true in there, it's going to require a lot of courage of me to come out and criticize the religion. And therefore, they bury their head in the proverbial sand and just ape the same idiotic sort of liberal platitudes, Islam is a religion of peace. And so there is no amount of information that you could offer these people that can somehow get them to alter their position. And I'm somebody who, I'm a behavioral scientist. I study how people think. And one of the things that I've done in my work is that I've, if you'd like, enumerated the number of cognitive defenses that people come up with to try to protect the integrity of Islam. How could we penetrate those obstacles, according to you? Just information?
Well, information, confronting even these guys and showing them what Islam is through different means, through different ways, even political involvement, because still there are so many things decided, so many decisions in the Western world are based on economy, on relationships with other countries. For example, Saudi Arabia is a source of a lot of Islam that is spread all over the world, and nobody's trying to stop that on a practical level because they don't want to lose their economical benefits from Saudi Arabia, especially oil products. And I think things should change. Even policymakers, they should address the issue from its roots instead of trying to deal with the symptoms, not the roots. The symptoms are a bomb here, a bomb there, terrorist activity in Sweden or in Egypt or in even San Bernardino or Orlando. Those are just symptoms. The real root is in the religion, is in Islam. So we have to come up with solutions from every level, not just information, but even policies, even debates, even things that security, immigration, on every level. We should fight this ideology that can destroy the whole humanity, not just, it's not just a religion. One of the problems, I think you are aware of it, is the Western person on average projects his own worldview of religion on Muslims. He thinks they think the same way about religion. A Western will take religion as a personal thing. It's something individual between me and God. Nobody has the right to intervene. That's a choice I make. But Islam is not like that. It's not a personal relationship with Allah, only that. It has many aspects. It's me with Allah, but me imposing the same Sharia, the same doctrine on people around me and try to eradicate the kufr, the infidelity from the whole earth and impose one religion. That's my duty as a Muslim. So it's not something personal. It intervenes in everything in life.
So I want to hold off on immigration for a second, but before we get to immigration, let's talk about, so, people put all sorts of qualifiers, it's radical extremism, extremist violence, radical jihadism, jihadist violent. Yeah. So you could come up with all sorts of fun permutations so that you could ultimately hide the fact that it all goes back to Islam. So do you agree with Prime Minister Erdogan of Turkey when he said, Islam is Islam, it's offensive to call something moderate and this and that, there is only one Islam? Or do you see any pragmatic value, even if you don't believe it? Do you see any pragmatic value in putting the qualifiers, Islamism and so on, because at least it makes people feel as though they're not frontally attacking the religion. What's your view on this issue?
Well, I think Erdogan is a terrorist. Is one of the terrorists. It's just he uses politics to spread his radical views, and I think he's not different than al-Baghdadi. Just al-Baghdadi is applying that what he believes on the ground he controls, and Erdogan is just waiting for the right time to turn everything to a radical Muslim country and spreading Islam to Europe and different places. So I think he's a brotherhood brain, Muslim brotherhood brain, who's there, who's trying to apply his agenda. Well, put that aside, but labeling terrorism or jihadism or Islamism or all these, I think people are trying to avoid labeling it Islam because they don't want to put all Muslims in one category as terrorists, because that could be a confusion for people. If we say Muslims, then that implies every Muslim is a terrorist, which is not the case. You and me, we know that not every Muslim is a terrorist. And to us, because it's simple, if we go back to what I said at the beginning, Muslims are selective. It's like anybody on earth, they select some things from their religion. My mom selects only few things from Islam. She puts the scarf and probably she prays, and that's all. She doesn't want anything to do with anything else. And some Muslims take Ramadan, prayer, Hajj, and some dressing or something. And most Muslims are like that, by the way. But many, they want to take it literally. They want to take every aspect of Islam. If you take every aspect of Islam, you will turn to Abu Laden or Zawahiri or al-Baghdadi.
By the way, all those guys that you just mentioned, this is what I did a Sad Truth clip called No True Scotsman. It's a fallacy where whatever you say, someone will say, oh no, but he's no true Muslim. So the Grand Mufti al-Husseini in Jerusalem before the modern state of Israel. So I quoted him. I quoted Yusuf al-Qaradawi. I quoted Hassan al-Banna. I quoted Ayatollah Khomeini, and I quoted the current caliph of Daesh, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. The response is each of those guys is a fake Muslim. So I mean, think about the cognitive biases that these people are being parasitized by. When these people are defined by how much they know about Islam, by how pious they are in their Islamic practice, the rebuttal to my quotes of these guys is, but bro, these are not real Muslims. So this is the difficulty that I face in my discourse, because oftentimes it's because people are dishonest, but other times it's that they're just ignorant, right? And so they just... Anyways, go ahead.
Well, if Omar Abdurrahman, the blind sheikh, he has a PhD from Al-Azhar, doesn't know anything about the true Islam, who's going to know about Islam anything? Right. If al-Baghdadi has a PhD in Sharia and he's ignorant, he's a false Muslim, so who's the true Muslim? I always tell them, we are not asking the question who represents Muslims. We're asking the question who represents Islam. And we have to differentiate between that, because Muslims will never agree on who represents them. Shia will not represent Sunnah, and Sunnah will not represent Shia. And it goes into even the conflict within each group, between the Sunnis, Sufis, or the Salafis, or who is going to represent them. Al-Azhar even will not be chosen by Muslims as an institution to represent all of them. Anyway, so Muslims we can talk about who represents Islam. We need to define what is Islam and how we represent Islam. And I did a short segment on my YouTube channel, and unfortunately it's in Arabic, who represents Islam, and I made a chart. And I started checking one box each time I mention, for example, one entity. Let's say Morocco, and let's take, for example, a salat, a zakat, prayer, fasting, given the tithe, and going to pilgrimage, and applying the penal code. And let's just try these things. Morocco doesn't apply the hudud, imputation, doesn't force people to pray, doesn't force people to give zakat, and they let people go to Hajj or not to go. So Morocco, for me, is not qualified as a Muslim country because you cannot check all these boxes.
Right.
Let's take ISIS. They force each one of these. So who represents Islam? It's ISIS who represents Islam more than Morocco or Algeria. So who's the fake here?
Incredible.
People
Well,
don't realize that.
It's a beautiful demonstration that you did there. I'll tell you what the typical Grand Mufti of Unicorn Islam will say. My friend Ahmad, who drinks, who eats pork, who sleeps around, who's never been to the mosque, that's the true Muslim.
Right. Well, his friend Ahmed could be killed if he goes to a Muslim country for doing that.
Exactly. So, I mean, bottom line, as I repeatedly say to all of the people who follow my work, this is basically ideological trench warfare, right? It's house to house warfare of ideas. And there are really two ways that this problem is going to be solved. It's going to be resolved one way or the other at some point. People are going to wake up. But we can either do it today peacefully in the way that you and I are doing it, which is we don't want violence, we don't want hatred, we want to talk about ideas and we want the best ideas to win. Or down the line, we could do it violently, like the place that I escaped from in Lebanon. Do you hold out hope that, and at some point I'm going to ask you about immigration, but do you hold out hope that we could still resolve this issue that is facing the globe peacefully, or are you pessimistic that there is ultimately no way to avoid bloodshed?
Well, I think I still have hope because I see a lot of response to what I'm doing from the Middle East. I receive a lot of response from Iraq, from Egypt, from Algeria, from Morocco, even from Saudi Arabia and the Gulf area. So so many people are saying we are sick of Islam, we are sick of this ideology, and we want to change. And so many of them either becoming agnostic or Christians or atheists. They are leaving Islam with thousands. And if I'm very careful with numbers, but the numbers that are coming to me personally on my email box are really surprising even to me. And those numbers give me hope because the young generation, they have access to internet, they have access to information, they can compare the best ideas, as you said, and see what's best for their lives. And I think living in a Muslim country under Islam and seeing what's happening in Syria and Iraq and Libya and all the countries that are in chaos right now because of Islam, we can tell that people are going to leave Islam with millions in the coming years. So those people, I have hope one day they will change their countries. They will change how people think. They will revolt against their ideology, and probably we don't need violence to change it. We don't need violent confrontation.
So do you see that, I mean, if we had a time machine and we could go 100, 200, 1,000 years from now, do you see a world where Islam will have lost its position in the same way that, say, at the erasing of the Soviet Union wall, 1989, communism has pretty much died, except in a few little pockets where it still remains. Do you see that the battle of ideas will eventually take Islam to that same trajectory? I mean, could you really imagine a world where 1/5 of today's world population eventually would leave Islam? Is that possible?
Well, I'm not saying Islam will disappear, as a religion. I don't say that, but I say two things will happen. Islam will not have the masses that it has today, and it will not have the same, um, let's say, the same form as we have it today. Probably Sufism will be a choice. People just will take it as a spiritual thing, and they will leave every aspect of it out. They will take just the prayers or the reciting or something like that. So it will be like a spiritual movement instead of a Sharia that wants to domain or to govern the whole world. That's one of the things. The second thing, it will lose so many people, not everyone, but probably a huge percentage in the coming years. Why I'm saying that? Because if I look to every aspect of Islam, I see it's losing ground. I see it on the economy. I see it on population. Even people are afraid from the Muslim birth rate. I don't agree with that. There is a huge drop in the Muslim world. And in two generations, it dropped very well. It dropped. Even in Turkey, they are below replacement rate. And in Iran, they are below replacement rate. On the economy, they are dependent on oil. Islam is spreading because of money. Let's put it that way. Those countries like Saudi Arabia, they give a lot of money to make even care, for example, where it gets the money, the funding. It gets it from Muslim countries. And even centers. I go to many countries in Australia, in Europe, in Canada, Muslim centers or Islamic centers, they receive their funding, a big chunk from these countries. And these countries will suffer because oil prices are going to go down. And I am with the peak theory because oil reached a peak and now it's going down. So basically in 2 decades, I think we will have a huge problem in the Gulf area and the Muslim-rich countries. So they will not be able to spread Islam. So Islam will lose the ground. And actually, if you look at it nowadays, the violence that's happening, actually, it's another sign. Because when you lose on the battle of ideas, you go to violence. And Islam lost on the battle of ideas. That's why those young people, they want to go to violence to make change happen. They are frustrated. They have been sold an image of the glory of Islam was when we had power and we invaded the whole world. But they see the Muslim Ummah is losing ground on every level. We are not the best nation on science. We are not the best nation on ethics. We are not the best nation on every level. Our universities are below. They are even outside of the most top universities. Everything. We don't invent. Apple or Facebook or Twitter or Samsung is not born in the Muslim world. It's born in the kafir, the world of kuffar, the infidels. So because of this frustration, they want to change society through violence. So that's a sign that Islam is losing already.
Now, you mentioned many different facets that will result in the eventual defeat of Islam: economic, oil, demographic, birth rate. One, you said at one point, okay, they might decide to do sort of the cafeteria approach and choose Sufism, okay? Yeah. Now, is that because they're simply applying the unicorn Islam, cafeteria Islam, or do you argue that through a process of canonical reformation, you could get from current point A to current point B? And before you answer, let me tell you what I think, which might contextualize how you decide to answer. I actually think that the process of reformation is a perfectly doomed project. In other words, guys like Majid Nawaz, with whom I tried to interact, but of course he ignored me because it's easier to talk to the gullible Westerners, not to talk to somebody who's going to challenge him on each of these issues. Now his heart might be very much in the right place, and I commend him for any effort that he's doing. But I analogize it to the guys who are rearranging the chairs on the proverbial deck of the Titanic, right? Sitting there and trying to go through kil harf, right? Every letter in the Quran in the Hadith, and trying to change how we interpret and so on, is a lost cause. So what are your views on reformation? Is this something that we want to try? If yes, how? If no, then how can we get to Sufism?
Well, reformation will not happen, period. And those guys who are promoting it, they are just trying to sell it to the West. They are not trying it in the Muslim world. You don't see anybody trying to reform it. If he wants to reform it, he's actually trying to convince the West we can do a reformation. Well, just go to the Muslim world and try to do a reformation instead of selling the idea.
And by the way, excuse me for interrupting you, but by the way, it's not as though he's the first guy to have ever thought, oh, gee, reformation. There's only 1,400 years of guys who've tried reformation, and regrettably they failed. But Majid Nawaz is going to be the guy with the really pretty voice and the nicely dressed who's going to lead that reformation.
I always ask them, when the true Islam was applied, give me a period of time so we can take it as an example or a role model we should follow in Islam. So if 1,400 years you tell me people applied Islam in a wrong way and they misunderstood it, then how there's no Islam then? What is Islam?
Go ahead. Here's what they're gonna. I'm gonna answer for them. But brother, Andalusia. Remember, Jews, Christians, and Muslims walked hand in hand, kissing each other. Brother, in Morocco, there was a very nice Jewish community, and right. So they always identify a small pocket of time where there wasn't massive killing, and that's the real Islam, where we all held.
But that's not even. If they take that, they will be in more trouble. What Muslims went to do in Andalusia, raided that part of the world. So it raids our jihad then we go back to square zero. And if they talk about Morocco, what took Islam to Morocco? How did they go there? How did they spread the Islam in Morocco? How did they kill the Berbers and they took over their countries? Because they want to spread Islam. So jihad is a we go back to the same starting point.
So how did they get to Sufism? Yeah, go ahead.
Reformation will not happen, but as you know, as evolution, natural selection forces things to happen. So natural selection of ideas will force people to choose a form. So people will get sick and tired of violence. People will get sick and tired of political, of religion being involved in politics. So they will choose to ignore those parts. It's like asking, how did we end up with Morocco not applying Sharia?
Right.
It's a process because it didn't work.
Right.
So Egypt, they don't cut the hands. So why they ignore the big part of Sharia and they still hold to one part? Because we're still in the process of changing this religion. One time we reach a point that people will take only the spiritual aspect of Islam and they will leave everything else, as they did with the penal code.
Amen, brother. Tell me about a very pragmatic issue that we face all over the West, and I'm always conflicted, and I personally don't know the final answer to my question, although I have some ideas. So we have immigration, right? I mean, I am a product of immigration, so of course I support immigration. There are endless Muslims that, of course, are going to come into any society and do nothing but contribute positively. But we also know, as I explained on many occasions, and most famously perhaps in my chat with Sam Harris, that the problem that one should be focusing on when discussing immigration is not how many people are coming in who are ISIS terrorists. I mean, that's important, but that's actually a minuscule part of the greater issue. You have to take a long-term view of the problem, and which is when you're letting in a bunch of people who perfectly don't share any of your values, right? I mean, they don't agree with you on homosexuality, on Jews, on Christians, on freedom of conscience, on freedom of speech, on women's clitorises, on sexuality, on every single thing that you would consider to be liberal and modern. They disagree with you. And we know this because we've done scientific surveys where the people that are coming from all those regions will have things like 95 to 99% hatred of the Jew. So if I'm letting in 50,000 Syrians, yes, I could worry about how many ISIS terrorists get in, and I should stop that. But out of the 50,000 Syrians, if 98% harbor genocidal hatred of the Jew, then I think it is perfectly rational of me to be concerned about letting in those values in. Correct? So, how do we navigate this problem? Because on the one hand, we are open societies. We want to be humane. Many people are fleeing misery. But we also know that they're bringing in a cultural and religious baggage that we don't want here, and we certainly don't want it to grow here. How do we navigate through this balance?
Well, first of all, I confirm what you said, because people just focus on the guys who like carry some operations, but they don't focus on people who are sharing the same things, but they are not applying them yet. And who knows when they are going to be like terrorists, actual terrorists, not just extremists in their ideas. I personally, I received so many threats on my Facebook page from Western countries, from America, from Sweden, from France. People write me with their profiles on Facebook, and they say, I got one guy from San Diego with his own name, with his own profile. He's Palestinian, and he said, I just want to go to paradise by killing you. I want to kill you so I can have the honor of killing you. And this guy is not terrorist yet because he didn't do it, but he is a terrorist in his ideas. And so many like that. So if you're talking about ideas, I think so many Muslims hold extreme ideas. They want to eradicate Jews. They want to rule over the world. And they see America as the great Satan, but they want to take advantage of the benefits, and they want to take advantage of freedom, and they want to take advantage of every aspect that the Western society gives them. But in the same time, they want to turn it to an Islamic society. They want to do everything they can so they can affect every detail in the Western society. How can we solve that? I don't have a magic solution. I'm trying to think with so many others. We're trying to think and bring the best ideas onto the table. One of the things we should ask ourselves, should we help everybody? Is it our duty to help everybody? Why we don't help African countries that are in extreme need of food and so many things? Why we don't bring them? Why we bring only Middle Easterns, especially those who hold ideas against our faith? Should we choose based on religion? That's another, because people see it as discriminating. If you choose Christians and not Muslims, as President Donald Trump, he said we should make it easy for Christians in the Middle East to immigrate more than Muslims, and everybody hated that. Well, it has a logic in it, because I never heard a Christian in the Middle East exploded himself in a Muslim gathering, for example, or any place. Why? Because they are a peaceful minority there. I never heard of a Jew exploding himself among Muslims, because even though Jews were persecuted from Muslims, and he never took revenge or did that to them. And Christians, the same thing. We just heard about the explosions in Egypt. I never heard of a Christian Egyptian who exploded himself among Muslims in their mosques. So why not? Why not help the persecuted minorities and bring them? The Yazidis. Did you ever hear a Yazidi exploded himself? Did you ever, or the Druze? I never heard of a Durzi who did that. Only Muslims. So why not help the minorities who are already persecuted there? Why helping the people who are hating the West? I'm not implying that everybody does, but we don't have a machine that detects who does and who doesn't. There's not a simple, even if you give them forms, they will lie and they will say, oh yeah, we love the West, until they make it and they change their opinion, or they can hide it. Even terrorists, they will tell you, I saw when I was applying for a visa, I saw one of the forms, it said, have you been involved in terrorist activities? Duh, I mean, am I going to say yes, even if I was a terrorist? So there's no way to see who loves Western values and ready to adapt to Western values, and those who really are against it and they just want to be in a Western country in order to Islamize it and then change it to a Muslim place.
So do you think then, and last question, and then we can wrap up with any projects that you might want to promote on the show.
Yeah.
I had Andrew McCarthy on my show, who is a federal prosecutor who was part of the team that actually prosecuted. You mentioned earlier the blind sheikh. You know, the guy who doesn't know anything about Islam but is a PhD from Al Azhar University, and so he's a lawyer, he's a constitutional expert, and I asked him point blank towards the end of our conversation whether he could ever imagine the following solution happening, whereby, and there are actually provisions in the American Constitution that allow you to declare an ideology seditious, meaning that it is contrary to all of the most fundamental values of your society. Now, typically people don't mind that, because if you think of Nazism as seditious or communism, then somehow people can say, well, yeah, there are ideologies that are contrary to our values, and therefore we should keep them out. We should not allow them. On the other hand, when an ideology cloaks itself in the robe of religion, it becomes a lot more difficult. It becomes impossible for most people to label that ideology as seditious. Do you ultimately see the possibility that we will, in a sense, force the Reformation in quotes, by rendering Islam in its current form seditious, and therefore, impossible to maintain within the framework of Western secular values? What do you think?
We should come up with legal solutions and legal articles that will be against certain aspects of the most dangerous aspects of Islam. For example, one of the things I suggested in my recent book, it's called ISIS and Islam, I suggested one of the solutions is to tajrim takfir, make takfir as illegal. So you cannot call somebody a kafir, because a kafir mostly translated as unbeliever, and it's not equivalent of unbeliever. It's a social status where you call somebody actually a kafir, you are telling him that his blood is not protected and you can kill him. He doesn't have the same status as a Muslim. So even if a Muslim kills him, he will not be killed because of that person. He can just pay a ransom and goes freely. So this should be criminalized worldwide. If you call somebody a kafir, you should be persecuted for that. We should start identifying some aspects and seeing experts who can come up with some laws against them. I don't know how to do it because I'm not a legal expert, but I think people can find ways to stop it. You mentioned communism and Nazism. I think communism, if it has some prayers and fasting, will not change anything. Islam is the same. It just they added some spiritual aspects to it to hide the real ideology. The real ideology is as worse as Nazism because it calls for eradication of every non-Muslim on this earth. Allah in Islam hates them. He doesn't like them, and so He ordered Muslims to force them to Islam or eradicate them. This is a summarize of the whole worldview.
You said we should come up with some legal solutions. Here's my very humble solution coming from a non-lawyer. I'm not sure that criminalizing specific insults is the way to go. As you suggested, I agree with you that the word kafir is actually a much worse insult than the N-word in Black American history. It's the worst word. Now, yes, you could say, oh, but that's hate speech. I'm not sure that I think that that's the best way to go. My approach would be the following. If we want to live in a truly free society where everybody could say whatever, even racists can exist, right? I mean, I support the right of Holocaust deniers to say that the Holocaust never happened, and I'm Jewish, right? So I say you could spew whatever hate you want, but you can't incite violence, right? So it's not so much hate speech. It's rather the fact that if you could make the argument that there are literally endless passages in Islamic doctrines that directly call for the incitement of violence toward others, then that should be banned. So then you ban the elements of the religion, not so much that are racist or supremacist, but that actually call for a call to action. And just doing that legally will already get rid of much of Islam for you. What do you think of that solution?
I think I agree with you. Just like probably a misunderstanding because I'm not applying. I'm not saying that it's just hatred speech. When you say somebody kafir, actually Faraj Fouda in Egypt, the secular writer who tried to speak against Islamists, he was killed because of the word kafir. So if you say that person is a kafir, actually you're giving green light to somebody to kill him.
Right.
So it implies it's behind the words. It's implying that just go kill him. He is against our faith. So everything that have an aspect of violence into it, I agree. We should find legal solutions to it so we can stop it. Jihad, for example, the same thing. We can do some legal research and come up with solutions against jihad. Whoever promotes jihad or talk about governing the world with a caliphate and standing against every government. I saw Anjem Chaudhary in UK. He was preaching that in the streets, and nobody arrested him back then. And this is so stupid. How can we tolerate intolerance? It's self-defeating.
Listen, in Montreal, where I live, I've shared clips of imams in mosques in Montreal calling for the annihilation of the Jews, right? So you have Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's government that has just passed a motion, M103, that specifically targets Islamophobia and other religious discriminations. They added the other religious discrimination so that it doesn't seem as though it's only about Islamophobia.
Yeah,
so
hide behind it.
Exactly. So on the one hand, I live in a world where now one has to worry whether our conversation would be deemed improper according to Motion 103, while at the same time there are imams not in Yemen, not in Kuwait, not in Saudi Arabia, in Montreal preaching for the annihilation of the Jews. That can't be tolerated in a free and just society.
No, I agree with you 100%.
Thank you, brother. Any projects that that people may not be yet aware of that you would like to use this opportunity to promote, please go ahead, do it right now.
Thank you so much for having me. I have a website that I'm still working on. It's going to be in English and Arabic. It's already online, but I'm still adding material to it. It's brotherrashid.com. Brother Rashid. Rashid, it's in French. Rachid. We write because we were occupied by France, so we write it in a French way. But I'm working on a book that's going to come soon in English. It's already there in Arabic and in French, ISIS and Islam, through the eyes of former Muslim. And it's going to be in English, available soon. It's on the editing process. I think hopefully in 2 months it will be on Amazon. So just check my website, check my YouTube channel, and thank you so much.
Shukran ya khayi. Stay on the line. Thank you so much, brother. Cheers.
All right. Bye.